and welcome to another highly evolved episode of We Only Look Thin. I am Katherine Weigel, and one of your hosts, and I've lost about 140 pounds. Oh, I said 140, not 145. You know what that means.
Boy.
And with me today is...
Donald Weigel.
Hello.
And I've lost about 100 pounds, and we're here to talk about it.
We sure are. This is highly evolved.
We've kept most of our weight off.
Wow, that's a really strong opener.
We've kept most of it off for about 3.5 years. I'm still pretty much right there.
That's awesome. Good for you.
Yeah.
I mentioned on a recent episode that I'm up about 4 pounds, 5 pounds from where I was. We don't have a scale that I'm going to show you all the charts and math, but still have lost a lot. But this summer I had a Sumspringa instead of a Rumspringa. Though there was some rum in the Sum.
There really was.
Yeah, Mai Tais are delicious, it turns out.
Yeah.
I've been on a tropical hideaway.
Super classy canned pre-made Mai Tais.
It's so good, though, you guys. Yeah, I track it. It's 340 calories a can. So that's a lot of rum in one can. But yeah, I'm up on the scale a little bit.
A lot of rum in your Rumspringa?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That's my
Oh, did
joke.
you already make that joke?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't listen.
It's fine. Nobody does. If you're still listening, thank you very much. But we sometimes we think about all or nothing attitudes, don't we, Donald?
We sure do. And I really think it's one of the biggest barriers to actually achieving weight loss and fitness goals. It's this idea that if you can't be your ideal self, that you should do nothing at all. And it is one of the things that I find the most infuriating, but also for many years, we could even say most of my life, I fell victim to it too. Like, I really believed that if I had to be either 100% hardcore, someone who went to a gym 5 or 6 days a week, worked out, and then ate the perfect diet all the time, or else if I couldn't commit to that, if I couldn't do that, then I did nothing and I tracked nothing and I just basically, kept going up and up the scale.
Yeah. So I think as this episode is coming out, it's probably coming out in early September, I think. I don't know.
No one can figure that out. Yeah.
The math that goes
I can't
along
do that
with
math right now. Yeah.
But let's pretend this is coming out in September. And September is sort of a new year point. Kids are going back to school, whether you have kids or not. Kids are going back to school.
Yes. Whether you believe it or not, kids are still going back to school.
But I think it's a good time to sort of reassess the season of our life that we are in. Sometimes we have ideals about the perfect way to do something. And you know what? As we get older, we realize that we have the opportunity to kind of step back on those perfection, ideal self versions of ourselves. We've, like Donald was just saying, we used to think it had to be the all or nothing. But on this episode, we're going to talk about the evolution and the kind of spectrum. There's so many different, and pyramids. There's so many different ways to tell the same story. But we're going to start out this story in the year 1928.
Whoa! Whoa, I had no idea we were going back that far.
I wrote on my notes 1928.
That was even before I was born.
Before you were born, but during the reign of Calvin Coolidge.
the Coolidge reign of terror.
I don't know anything.
Why does that? I have images of Calvin Coolidge, like, with dragons. Like, razing cities to the ground.
There are times with our daughter where we have to say, like, dragons weren't actually a thing. Like, that's not. And she's like, well, it could have been. No, dragons weren't a thing.
Although they did find this pterosaur recently. They found a skeleton of it that it looks remarkably dragon-like. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
How do you spell
Look
pterodon?
It up in the news.
Does it start with a P?
Yeah, it's a P. P-T.
That's not right.
Yeah,
that's too many
it's
letters.
not right at all.
But anyway, let's just stick with the reign of Calvin Coolidge. They were dark times. I don't know what they were. I don't know anything about 1928.
Well, it was shortly before a pretty bad stock market crash.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
But 1928, something magical happened in America, Donald.
Did it?
I think it was America. I don't even know. Sliced bread was invented.
Oh, well, we're going to take credit for it because we're ugly Americans. If we didn't invent sliced bread, we're going to say we did.
So imagine, if you will, Sally housewife.
Yeah.
If you will. Just imagine there's a housewife in his house.
Yeah.
Everyone's making their own bread, Donald.
Yeah.
Loaves of bread are going hither and yon. It was before the invention of celiac disease.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm winning people right
Right,
now.
right.
So the reign of terror of Calvin Coolidge is happening. Sliced
Right.
bread. The only beacon in the dark night is sliced bread.
Right.
Maybe Sally Homemaker is just happy that someone else is slicing their bread for them.
Yeah.
And but the other housewife, let's call her, I don't know, Beatrice, let's say. Beatrice is like, oh my gosh, Sally is buying pre-sliced bread. What kind of a garbage housewife is she? She can't even slice her own bread.
Yeah.
What
seriously.
kind of example
How lazy
is
do you
she?
have to be to buy pre-sliced bread, Sally?
So everyone listening right now, you're imagining Calvin Coolidge. You're imagining sliced bread.
You're imagining dragons raising cities with fire in 1928, because that's what happened.
Oh my gosh, we're amazing.
That's what I am imagining anyway.
People are too busy running from dragons to slice their own bread. That's what we've decided.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so luckily, dragons are able to toast the sliced bread with their fire. So anyway,
if you find a gentle young dragon, you can have it toast your bread for you.
no, but you remember in like the Flintstones how they would have like the toaster would just be like a little dragon or whatever, like toasting the bread for them. Those were good times. And pterodactyls were actually record player.
Yeah, dinosaur-powered appliances are not, in use much anymore. But...
Yeah, anymore. But in the past, you just look it up. It's on Google.
Right.
Okay, so getting back to sliced bread. Can you imagine a situation in which a clatch of women were drinking coffee and talking smack about Sally, who bought the pre-sliced bread?
Yeah.
It is an invention to make something easier. But I'm confident, going back into the history books, that there were some bitter housewives who were talking smack about Sally for buying the pre-sliced bread.
Yeah, probably.
And as we are today, people, we think sliced bread is just a normal, it's de rigueur. Everyone buys pre-sliced bread because that's what you do. But at the time, it saved one person some time. And it probably made some other people very judgy.
Yeah.
And we might be looking at this and thinking, that is olden times, and people don't do that anymore. It's just part of society.
Oh, no. Oh, no, fair listener. That is where you are oh so wrong.
That is where you are oh so wrong. We, as a nation, as a people, as a planet, we are still judgy McJudgersons about the food choices of others. We fall victim to thinking that one way of eating is better, one way of slicing bread is better. And we're here to tell you that there is a spectrum of choices, that we fall somewhere on the line, somewhere on the evolution of what we think is the right way to eat, the right way to diet, the right way to do a plan. And we are going to knock down all those walls right now.
We are going to knock down those walls like dragons knocking down a city. No, I'll stop. But, I think part of the point of this is that I spent a lot of my life, and I think a lot of people out there spend a lot of their lives in the pursuit of perfection.
Yeah.
Sort of the flip side of this is like, you might be, turning your nose up at somebody else for doing what you perceive as cutting a corner with their food choices. But then at the same time, you might be imagining to yourself this perfect self, this perfect ideal meal that you're going to make all the time. And you realize you can't do it, or you don't have one part of it. And so then you just default to takeout food.
Yeah.
Or you default to, eating something that's way, way over your calories and, an unplanned indulgence. And I did that for many, many years. My pursuit of perfection led me to procrastinate and do nothing and just put off doing anything at all because I was trying to do the ideal thing.
Well, and for sure. And I remember before we became parents magically to an 8-year-old, listen to old episodes to find out how that happened.
Yeah.
Came in a basket.
Magically.
Like baby Moses.
Exactly. We conjured her with a spell.
So before we became parents, I went over to a friend's house, and their kid went into the refrigerator and grabbed an Uncrustable.
Yeah.
The sliced bread of 1928. And I saw this child grab the Uncrustable, and I thought to myself, oh, for shame.
Yeah.
For shame.
Yeah.
How could you not find the time to mill your own wheat and grow your own strawberry jam?
I think there's
mill your own peanut butter.
Oh my God. I think there's no one more judgy than young people who don't yet have kids and say to themselves, and this is me, by the way, say to themselves, I would never. And you know, when our kid first moved in with us, we bought reusable lunch bags and metal water bottles.
Yeah, and whole then, grain, whatever.
And then, and then she was losing them every day on the playground.
Hundreds of dollars of recyclable materials lost.
Yeah, and we finally were like, look, we gotta just do paper bags and plastic bags and the whole thing. And we're sorry, Mother Earth.
Yeah.
But
and anyway, so the point here is that before we knew better, we thought that this ideal parenthood was going to be the homemade everything. And then we got to the point where we realized that the Uncrustables just made sense.
Right.
And when we are on this weight loss journey, we think that there is some perfection that we have to hit. I know Donald said that like 20 minutes ago when we were beginning this preamble to the Constitution.
Yeah, I said it very well.
He did. But we think that we have to hit this sort of ideal. And when we are imagining how we would manage something if we were in that situation, the ideals are so high. And we have this fantasy self version of ourselves where we think that we would do it better and more effectively and more mindfully.
Yeah, we imagine that we channel the eye of the tiger and we're just completely 100% hardcore for the rest of our lives, that everything will align perfectly someday and we'll get there.
Right. So in this season of our lives, we have been on this weight loss journey adventure for over 5 years, and we had to break down that perfection wall. I have a little thing I'm going to talk about. I'm going to take you on a journey and see if any of this resonates with you.
Whoa.
Any of what I say next falls into a trap that you have found yourself.
I can't wait.
So when we're thinking about the food that we eat and the food that we have with our family, we want the whole family to love it. But it also needs to have zero prep time, all the freshest ingredients. It needs to be inexpensive, delicious, high protein, non-GMO, of course, high fiber, fair trade, farm to table, easy to clean up.
Yeah.
And it needs to have the exact balance of macronutrients. And I need all of the calories to 100% support my habits.
Yeah.
And it needs to be authentic and honor different cultures and cuisine types so that my family expands their cultural awareness.
Of course.
Thus ensuring the future generations will achieve world peace. And we need leftovers, but not too many leftovers, because then I will binge eat.
Absolutely.
I need the perfect plan that will encompass all of those important factors in my life.
That just seems really easy to do right there. I don't know why we're not doing that all the time.
But, ha 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 ha, laughy, laughy joke. But I think a lot of times when we're thinking about starting a new weight loss plan or, doing some plan that starts with a number like whole 20, whole 30, 21 day fix or whatever, we think that we need a plan that is going to cover every single expectation in all the world. I was listening to a podcast the other day that talked about it being that sort of house hunters effect of like, okay, we need 17 bathrooms and we need, a perfect yard, and it needs to be close to schools, but it needs to be rural and it needs to be whatever. And our budget is $10.
Right.
And we do that with our health expectations, that it needs to meet all of these perfect ideals for ourselves. And if it doesn't, then we're just going to get takeout.
Well, and I think for a long time, I lied to myself over and over again. And I would say that if I can't find something that meets all of these criteria, that, I just shouldn't do anything. And really what was happening was I was looking for an excuse to not put in any effort at all. I wanted to find to somebody to tell me that it was okay just to do nothing, I think. And so I would look for all of these excuses. Well, if it can't be, all of these 10 things, then I shouldn't do anything at all.
Well, and I think too, in this last, year and a half decade of COVID,
right.
there has been, there are people who have started making their own sourdough bread and doing, banana muffins and all these
so much sourdough,
home churned things.
There's actually a person at work who has been trying to foist extra sourdough bread onto people.
It's so good. I had a slice. Luckily,
I brought some home.
Yeah, I ate some. So what are you going to do? But I did actually get rid of half the loaf. So
yeah,
I say that was progress. So when we have these fantasy self ideals, we often forego our health goals. And we are going to talk about, hopefully in this episode and the next episode, sort of all of the things that we can consider when we're looking at a meal plan or, the certain season of our life and what is actually realistic and how that changes based on circumstances. And if we wait for that perfect time when everything is in balance, we're going to be waiting a really long time. And I know at the beginning we made the joke about the sliced bread and that being weird, and off-putting. But think about all the things in your life now that you hold yourself to this higher expectation, and because you can't meet it, you just don't do anything. So we're going to cover a few things on this episode, sort of talking generally about the ways that we can sabotage ourselves with too much expectation. And then we're going to talk in the next episode about sort of some practical things to consider when you're actually putting a plan together.
One of those things that I think prevents us from doing anything is external pressure or perceived societal pressure.
For sure.
We worry about what the neighbors would think or what society would say that I should do. And we need to ask ourselves, are we trying to keep up with an unrealistic or idealistic version of ourselves rather than just doing what we actually can do?
Right. I remember when we became parents, like Donald was saying, we bought all of these recyclable materials for them to go to school with. And I would make these bento box breakfasts, lunches that were, I'd see on Instagram of the perfect way to have a meal for your child. And then she'd come home from school and half of it wouldn't be eaten, or she said it was embarrassing to have the perfect bento. So I'm trying to keep up with what I think internet moms are doing, when in reality, just a hunk of cheese would have been fine and, some tomatoes. But for my perception, I needed this perfect meal to show everyone else that I was a great parent. And that was putting way too much pressure on myself. And I think in terms of our weight loss goals, we see people doing, the mason jar salads and meal prep and all of these big ideals. And we think if I can't achieve that, then I can't lose weight. I don't have the right recipe. I don't have the right meal prep. I don't have the right, plan. And really, that's a highly evolved part of the weight loss process.
Right.
When I started this, all I did was track calories. I was eating frozen food. I was, eating packaged foods, but I didn't feel like I was doing it the right way because you see all these other people making everything from scratch. And that ideal kept me for decades from actually achieving my goals.
Well, and spoiler alert, I still eat primarily frozen foods and pre-prepared meals. And I really have decided for myself that it is okay to go the easy route with this. I feel like doing what I'm doing. A, it's worked in terms of my health and my weight loss goals. But B, it is okay for me to, buy the pre-cut pineapple, the pre-cut broccoli and cauliflower that I just have to put in the microwave for a little bit, to rely on frozen meals and frozen veggie burgers and that sort of thing, and not have to make all of these things from scratch that I thought were kind of essential to be, not just to reach health and fitness goals, but to be a good person for some reason.
Well, and I think, that whole hashtag adulting thing comes up a lot, where we feel like, a real adult would make it from scratch. A real adult would have a balanced meal.
Right. That whole imposter syndrome.
Well, and I think too, just my perception of what a good mother would do or what a good family, meal looks like.
Yeah, you might have it stuck in your head, a good mother would make blank for her family. If I was a good mother, I would be making this. And so therefore, if I serve an Uncrustable for lunch, I'm a bad mom.
Right. Or, that's not how you're going to lose weight. And I've heard that before of you'll never lose weight eating pancakes, Bisquick mix. You'll never lose weight, doing it this way. So I know growing up for me, when I lived with my grandparents, my grandmother would start making dinner when I got home from school.
Oh, yeah.
It was like 2:30 in the afternoon
Yeah.
and she's, shucking corn and whatever. And I'm like, why is she even doing that? But dinner was on the table at 5:00.
Yeah.
And I thought that that's what a good wife did. I mean, she was a homemaker and that's what she did. But I remember when Donald and I got married, I remember he got home from work one night kind of late and I had spent the entire afternoon making dinner and it was this big, complicated meal.
Yeah.
And Donald got home. He didn't know I was making a big meal.
No.
I was so frustrated by the time he got home that I was like, here, I made you this amazing dinner. He's like, oh, thanks, honey. But I'm like mad about it because I'm like, okay, now I understand why my grandmother started cooking at 2:30 because it takes a really long time to make the from scratch perfect meal.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I was trying to live up to this ideal homemaker situation and it just made me angry because that wasn't the actual lifestyle we were living with 9-to-5 jobs.
Well, and I think a lot of people equate their self-worth with their cooking. I got into a discussion recently with somebody at work about this and, talking about how, I was actually talking about this procrastination versus perfection thing. And, she really believed that if she wasn't cooking meals like real, in air quotes, meals, that she wasn't doing a good job for her family. Of course, this person is around my age and also has never had a weight problem. So it's a very different outlook on things. But it really can be ingrained in you that you think that you're either, if you're cooking, you're a good person. And if you're not, you're a bad person. It's hard to get over.
Well, and for our daughter, she doesn't really like fancy food or too many flavors at once. And I think that I need variety and I need, a good parent introduces kids to different meal types and stuff. She doesn't care.
Seriously, it's like, oh, there's too much flavor in this.
Seriously, I made spaghetti the other day and I put some garlic salt on it and some bay leaf in the water and she's like, this has gone bad.
This has taste in it.
I'm against it. And here I am trying to elevate her flavor palette. It wants nothing to do with it. I'm like, why am I trying this hard? I'm just sabotaging myself.
Yeah. And I think that brings us to our next point, which is that this can have impact on your relationships. Like it might be your love language. You might be trying to show love to your family by putting all of it into the food that you're cooking. And it might be hard to adjust that for your health and fitness needs.
Well, and two, I think that whole idea of, I know people who say like, oh, I love baking. Like baking is the way that I show love, or making big meals is the way I show love. And with people with disordered eating, maybe the baking isn't a really great way to show love. And I know that there are people out there who love baking. It's a way to unwind. It's a way to relax. It's a way to really like embrace the moment. But for someone like me who eats all, or half of the cookie dough before the cookies get on the tray, it is not a really helpful way for me to show love. Because am I showing love or am I using it as an excuse to overindulge myself?
Yeah.
I can't help it. This is what people expect of me. They love my crullers.
That whole thing of making, a couple of dozen cookies that the whole family is not going to eat, so you get to eat like half of them yourself.
Exactly. So it's that whole like, well, I consider myself a foodie.
Yeah, I'm a gourmand.
Yeah, exactly. And can you be a gourmand and a fit person at the same time? When I was, 100 pounds heavier than I am right now, trying to make home-cooked, simmered, beautiful meals and being the person who made the homemade food at the bake sale.
Right.
That was just an excuse for me to eat more. And sure, I love delicious food, but as someone with disordered eating, that is not a good indulgence for me to focus on.
Yeah, for sure. And so maybe ask yourself, how can you rechannel your love of cooking to align with your health and fitness goals? Maybe there's a way to adjust your recipes, or maybe there's a way to come up with new recipes, or make it a challenge for yourself to to really make things that are calorie friendly or whatever diet friendly that you're doing, rather than continuing to try and show love with all of these high calorie indulgent foods.
Right. And we talked about on a couple of the holiday episodes about rechanneling, like, well, it's my tradition to make this on, Sundays is pancake day, or we always make cookies. You can make healthful treats that don't, or, do crafts instead of being the person who identifies as making 20 different varieties of cookies for family. You can switch up those habits. You can turn toward, and, I did this too. I used to make the 9 or 20 layer dip, or I don't know how many layers there were. So many layers.
Yeah.
But I used to make a layer dip for parties. Remember parties when people saw each other? That was
vaguely,
fun.
Vaguely.
But then I turned to being someone who would make really interesting salads or fruit salads or something. And you're like, oh, boring, blah, blah, blah. But it was much more in line with my values as someone who was focusing on their fitness. And it was still, the process was still the same. And making it really pretty and interesting, that still happened, but the caloric impact wasn't the same.
Another thing that can hold people back, or that maybe you just need to reimagine, is what you're making and eating in alignment with your values. And a lot of people have problems with, is it vegetarian, organic, vegan, locally sourced? Is it from companies that share your political and social views? And even, are you afraid of single serving things because of environmentalism? And this is a hard issue.
Yeah.
I imagine that I'm going to make some people angry at me right now, but I used to be really hardcore environmentally conscious, and I still consider myself somebody who thinks about it, but I had to, at a certain point, understand that my personal health and fitness goals and my ability to be a healthy, active person had to take the driver's seat in this. And I still think about all of those things, but my first goal has to be to whether I'm going to be able to keep myself in my calorie goal for the day and keep up with my fitness. And if I can't do that, then I have to have the environmentalism take a back seat to it. And, I've been vegetarian for over 30 years now. And so that is still part of my life and my choices. But I think that we've taken a lot of grief for suggesting single serving mayonnaise things and single serving, treats and things like that, and small bags of chips instead of big ones. But I know if I buy the big family size bag of chips, that's one serving to me.
Yeah.
I can sit down and eat that whole thing. But if I buy a single serving item, then I'm much more likely to be able to control myself. And I know that's just sort of a psychological trick, but it really is the way that I work. And I imagine a lot of people out there work too.
Well, and I think too, as part of that, as being vegetarian or, having specific ideals, we can say well, I don't have time to lose weight, or I can't fit this in because I'm vegetarian or because I'm vegan or because, I need everything locally sourced. I've got to prioritize that. And Donald prioritizes frozen Boca burgers. The cost is high.
Yeah.
But if we don't have if I can't make my own mung bean patties and whatever, then I can't, lose weight, or
Right.
if I can't make my own homemade tofu, whatever. Donald has found a way to make it work for him in a caloric way that, fits his time that he has and his environmental needs.
Yeah, and even with the Boca burgers, there are times where I can do them in the air fryer and they're super tasty, or I can do them in the toaster oven and they're still really good. Or if I'm really in a pinch, it's 2 minutes in the microwave and it's still the same amount of low calorie, high protein food. And I still manage to fit it in depending on, what sort of time that I have.
Yeah. And I think with that, it's important to just know, and this sort of ties into everything, is what season are you in and how much time do you have to get something done? And sure, in an ideal world, we would be able to meal prep and we would do all of these things, organically and perfectly jarred salads and whatever. But if all you have time for is a microwaved whatever, you can still get the job done. And the way this factors in is I have I've heard people say like, oh, well, I'm a really picky eater, or, oh, I'm really, I can't do single serving, or I can't do whatever. Figuring out a way to make something work for you actually does matter. If we fall victim to the like, well, I'm this way, so change my mind. I will only do this, so change my mind. If you're looking for a fight, you're going to find one. But the real, growth mindset version of ourselves is, how can I make my current lifestyle and my current, needs work for me? And it turns out it works when you actually make it work.
And we don't have to, get married to these choices either, because choices that work for you at one time of your life may not work for another time. Catherine just mentioned the season of your life. Like, there are literally, the 4 seasons, and then there are the figurative seasons of your life. You might be when your kids are in school, or when you might be in school, it might be a particular season, or when you're at work, your work might ebb and flow in terms of, how busy you are. There might be times when you have a lot of free time to do things, and then times when you don't. And it's sort of adjusting for those seasons and figuring out, well, just because you've become super busy and you can't do the ideal thing, you can't live up to the ideal thing that you were doing when you weren't super busy, doesn't mean you should just do nothing. And in fact, it definitely doesn't mean that. You should do the best that you can, because a lot of times good needs to be good enough. And rather than, just giving up on everything because of lack of perfection is really the worst thing you can do.
And we've talked too about the toxic nostalgia that we can have about the good old days.
Oh, yeah.
Like when Donald was vegan back before we were married, he would make black bean soup, and he would make homemade rolls, and he would make homemade tofu burgers and all of these different things. Our life was much simpler back then. Our demands were so simple. I had no idea how
much free time I had when I was in my early 20s.
But, we can say, and even when a plan works, like doing Atkins or something like that, of like, oh, well, it was so easy back then. Okay, well, you lived at home with your parents, and you had, disposable income, and you worked half, part-time while you were going to college, all these different things. And we can go like, well, if I can't do that, then I'm not going to do anything. There are times when we, like I did Atkins, and life was so much simpler back then, and we had so many fewer things to do. But we can get caught in this, well, when things slow down, then I'll be able to focus on my health goals. Or if only I can make this from scratch, then I can do the thing. And we get so focused on the external perfection that we forget that there's that spectrum, or that sort of evolution, which we'll talk about more in the next episode, of what constitutes a good day, what constitutes something that fits into your calorie target. Does a carrot count as having a salad for the day?
Right.
Or do you need to go to the farmer's market in order to make it the perfect thing? Do you need to mill your own wheat in order to have the perfect nutritional balance?
I like how you pronounce wheat.
Thank you. Or, can you just get the single serving roll at, Wawa, which they have the most delicious Portuguese rolls.
Oh
One roll, that's all you need. It's
Please
fine.
Don't sexy talk about food on our weight loss podcast.
I won't. But it's that, Donald didn't have diabetes 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And it turns out now that, he is managing that the ideals and the certain foods that we eat are different than we did before. And it all matters when you're factoring in that season of life that you're in and how much time you have to get something done. Frozen is fine. It doesn't have to be the perfect food at the perfect time.
Yeah. And I have to really, I touched on this earlier. I have to really make sure that what I'm eating is in line with my health goals, because my diabetes is under control right now, but it could come raging back at any time if I'm not careful. And I really have to make that a priority.
Yeah. And, and as we sort of close up this episode, if we think about the season of life that we're in, and we put ourselves as the victim of, well, I'm on my own. I'm single. I don't have time. Why bother cooking for myself?
Right.
I've got a family and they expect home cooked perfect meals with lots of sauces and gravies. Oh, I don't cook for myself. Someone else cooks for me. How am I supposed to control it when someone else is cooking? I go out to eat all the time. How can I make this work for myself?
Right.
I see this sort of position of someone, virtually crossing their their arms saying like, change my mind.
Change my mind.
How can I make this work?
One of the most frustrating phrases in the weight loss and fitness world.
And it's this, either it's going to be this perfect harmony where everything fits into my plan, or it's going to be nothing. And being in a position where we know that we can actually make it work despite our challenges, despite our limitations, and going from that fixed mindset to a growth mindset of actually like enjoying the challenge of, okay, how can I make this work? How can I make this fit into my plan? It really does matter. And when we let go of those external expectations of what we think society thinks we should do, a good parent would do this, a good, by this age, I should be able to X, Y, or Z. When we let go of those, perceived societal white after Labor Day things,
right,
the better our lives get. And I still now am coming to the point where I'm coming up with ways where I can like troubleshoot my own ideals about, what a good parent does, what a good weight loss podcast host does. And the more I evolve that way, the easier the plan gets and the more malleable I am when struggle comes or, when unexpected, X factors ruin my plan.
Right.
And we challenge you to be more flexible with your ideal self. Sure, it would be amazing if all things aligned to make it so that we could meal prep perfectly and that all portions were perfect and that our family all agreed exactly what was the right thing to eat. But when we step back and realize that we have to be agents for our own health and that there's never going to be this perfect alignment of time and money and natural resources, we have to advocate for ourselves. We have the opportunity to advocate for ourselves. In the next episode, we're going to go sort of more into detail about the day-to-day practical ways to apply this. I know this has been a brain-bending episode full of dragons and presidents.
Oh my goodness, yes.
But, really thinking about the ways that we can advocate for our health goals, getting away from that ideal, getting away from perfection as procrastination, because that's where all of this leads us. When we think about, I would be able to do this if the circumstance changed. A perfect plan would be this. When we let go of perfection, we can actually make progress, which is what Donald and I have done over the last 5 years. And if we can do it, we know you can too.
Yes, indeed. I mean, seriously, like if we can do it, anyone can. There was nobody more lost than Catherine and I. Thank you so much for listening. You may not be able to be your ideal self in every way, but certainly your ideal self would be listening to this podcast. So we really appreciate that. You have found perfection for at least this amount of time. So thank you so much. If you would like to listen to all of our episodes, they are still available wherever you found this one or all the time at our website, weonlylookthin.com.
And if you are at weonlylookthin.com, you can click on Join Our Support Group and find out more about Wolt Place, We Only Look Thin Place. It is an online Facebook-based accountability group for women. It is not a weight loss plan, but it is a place for support, encouragement, and an opportunity to work on that growth mindset.
Yes, indeed.
It's a wonderful group. We do 2 to 3 Zoom meetings a week to troubleshoot issues. Super proud of it. So you can find out more about that there. We have 2 subscription options, a monthly option with a 3-day complimentary trial and a 3-month subscription with a 7-day complimentary trial to see if Wolt Place is right for you.
Please check it out. We think that you will enjoy it. And if you would like to reach us in other ways, you can always email us to weonlylookthin@gmail.com. We love to hear episode suggestions. We love to answer questions from there, and we appreciate hearing from you. Also, you can connect with us on the socials at We Only Look Thin on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
And if you would like your fingers to do the walking, you can also head over to Apple Podcast and leave us a rating.
We've got an ad in the yellow pages if you'd like to let your fingers do the walking.
AAA Weight Loss Podcast.
We decided that the yellow pages were still a viable advertising method.
We sure did. But head over to Apple Podcast and leave us a rating and review. review. It makes us feel good, and it also helps other people find our podcast when they are looking for nutrition and health podcasts. And it helps get the word out, and it makes us feel good too.
Yes, indeed. Or you could just tell somebody about our show. If you got something out of this and you think somebody else in your life would enjoy it or get some use out of it, we would appreciate you spreading the word.
We sure would. So if you think we lost all credibility when we talked about dragons reigning terror over Calvin Coolidge, just remember that Donald and I are an inspiration.
The information that you hear on this podcast is for informational purposes only. The hosts are not medical professionals. You should always consult with your doctor, nurse, or other certified health professional before beginning any diet or fitness program.